Caitlin Clark finally back on the basketball court, and it lived up to the anticipation. I mean, you immediately see it as soon as she checks into the game. She's the best point guard in the world, right? And she has vision and an ability to play make unlike anyone the women's game has ever seen before.
There are moments in sports where the anticipation has built so long and so intensely that almost nothing could actually live up to it. The hype becomes its own obstacle. The expectation becomes a ceiling that even elite performers struggle to clear. And then there are moments where the player walks onto the floor and within 3 possessions, every single person watching understands that the wait was completely worth it. Caitlin Clark's senior Team USA debut was the second kind of moment. This wasn't a player easing her way back into competition after a long absence. This wasn't a star carefully managing her minutes and finding her rhythm over the course of a game. From the moment she checked in off the bench, the game changed. The pace changed. The energy changed. And what she produced in those minutes wasn't just impressive, it was the kind of performance that answers questions definitively. But before we get into what she actually did on the floor, there's context worth understanding. Because how she entered this game and what surrounded her performance tells a story that's bigger than any individual stat line. And that story starts with something a lot of people are still talking about. Caitlin Clark came off the bench for Team USA in her senior national team debut. And before anyone uses that as a talking point, let's be completely clear about what that means and what it doesn't mean. This was her first game at this level with this group. Chelsea Gray got the starting assignment. A collection of veterans with senior national team history got the nod from the jump. Angel Reese started, partly because Aaliyah Boston was dealing with an injury that kept her out, and partly because the roster needed size in the starting lineup. The organizational hierarchy of a national team program doesn't get rewritten overnight for any player, regardless of their profile. That's not a slight. That's how these programs work. Players earn their way into the rotation and the starting lineup through the accumulation of time, experience, and demonstrated comfort at this specific level of competition. Clark was new to this particular stage. Coming off the bench was the right call. But here's the thing about Caitlin Clark, it doesn't really matter where she starts. What matters is what happens the moment she's on the floor. And the moment she checked in, you could see it immediately. The tempo shifted. The way the offense breathed changed. There's a pace that Clark plays with that is genuinely different from what most players at any level bring to the game. It's not just speed, it's rhythm. It's the way she controls the flow of possessions, speeding things up when the defense is scrambling, slowing things down to find the right read, and always scanning the floor with those eyes that seem to process everything happening at once. Her first 3 touches produced 3 assists. Not 3 shot attempts, not 3 drives to the basket, 3 assists. 3 times she touched the ball and immediately found a teammate in a better position to score. The first one came off delayed screen roll action, a concept that requires reading the defense's coverage of the screen, recognizing the moment the roll man creates separation, and threading the ball into a window that only opens briefly. She hit the pocket pass perfectly. First assist. The second was a quick read on the wing. She sees Kelsey Plum early, gets the ball out before the defense can rotate, and Plum knocks it down. Routine in execution, but the value is in how early she identified it. That's vision working faster than the defense can think. Second assist. The third came in transition. She pushed the pace, found Billings running the floor for the finish. Third assist. 3 touches in the game, and she'd already recorded a hat trick of dimes. That's not coincidence. That's not a generous stretch of early game luck. That's a player whose feel for how to make a basketball offense function is operating at a completely different frequency than everyone around her. The woman running the show in Senegal's front court had no chance against Team USA regardless of who was on the floor. But watching Clark direct traffic from the moment she arrived made something immediately clear. This team plays differently when she's in it. Not incrementally better. Differently. The identity of the offense shifts around her presence in ways that are visible to anyone paying attention. And that was just the playmaking, because the shooting was about to deliver its own statement. When you haven't played a meaningful game since July, when your previous season was defined more by managing injuries than by showcasing what you're actually capable of, your first shot back carries weight that goes beyond the 2 or 3 points it might produce. It's a signal, an early indicator of where your body is, where your confidence is, and whether the version of yourself that you've been working to get back to is actually there yet. Clark came off a curl, got position, put up the shot, and it went in with a friendly roll that felt like a reward for everything she'd been through to get back to this moment. The word friendly roll is doing some work there, because if you followed her last season closely, you know that friendly rolls were in short supply. When you're playing through a collection of injuries that are affecting your movement, your release timing, and your comfort in the shooting motion, the ball doesn't bounce your way with the same generosity. It finds the iron, finds the back of the rim, finds every part of the basket except the bottom of the net. That she got one here, on her first shot back, felt meaningful. Not because one shot tells you everything, but because it suggested that the physical situation had genuinely changed. That she was moving and releasing the ball in a way that had her in the right spots to benefit from a little good fortune. Then came the confirmation that it wasn't just that one shot. She went 4 of 5 from 3 in this game, 4 of 5 from deep. No hesitation, no easing into it. Catch and shoot, cash. Catch and shoot, cash. The kind of three-point shooting performance that only happens when a player is genuinely comfortable, physically and mentally, in the shooting motion. This matters beyond just the points it produced, because the knock on Clark during her injury-riddled stretch wasn't that she couldn't create or distribute. Her passing was largely intact, even when she was dealing with physical issues. The question was whether the shooting, the element of her game that made her the most unique offensive force in women's basketball, would return to the level that made her so impossible to guard. 4 of 5 from 3 in her return game answers that question in the most direct way possible. She wasn't just back, she was back. And with Clark shooting like that, while also distributing the way she does, the implications for Team USA's offensive ceiling start to expand in ways that are genuinely exciting for anyone who wants to see women's basketball showcased at its absolute best. But she wasn't alone on that floor, and what the players around her showed was worth paying close attention to. The conversation around this Team USA group has always included the question of what the younger generation looks like alongside the established names. And this game provided the first real look at that combination in a competitive setting, Clark sharing the floor with Angel Reese and Paige Beckers in particular. Angel Reese has been on a development arc that's been fascinating to watch. The things that made her stand out immediately, the physicality, the rebounding instincts, the competitive edge, those were always evident. But what's been emerging more recently is something that expands her game into territory that makes her genuinely harder to contain. She's been handling the ball more in transition, finishing off the bounce in ways that require touch and coordination beyond what a player whose game is primarily built around the paint typically develops this quickly. There's a comparison being made loosely, but not without basis, to the way Giannis Antetokounmpo has evolved his game by adding skill sets to a foundation built on physical gifts. The comparison isn't about saying Reese is Giannis, it's about the developmental pattern. Player establishes dominance through physical advantages. Player then systematically adds skill to that physical base. The combination becomes significantly more difficult to plan for defensively. Clark found Reese in this game for buckets. The chemistry between them, the way Clark draws defensive attention and creates openings for the players around her, is something that benefits Reese specifically. Because when Clark has the defense worried about what she's going to do with the ball, Angel gets to operate in space she wouldn't otherwise have. An Angel in space, finishing creatively, is a different problem than Angel fighting through contact in a crowded paint. Paige Beckers brings something entirely different to the equation. She's been labeled a synergy player, which is one of those terms that undersells what it actually means. A true synergy player in basketball is someone who makes every other player on the floor better by being on it. Because they move the ball, they make the right read, they don't hold possessions hostage to their own scoring instincts. They play the right way, even when the right way means giving up a touch they could have kept. Clark drew the defense on one possession, kicked it to Paige on the wing. Paige buckets, immediate and automatic from outside. But the play that really stood out came later. Paige cuts baseline off a Clark touch, gets the ball on the move, reads the defense rotating, and kicks it back out to a teammate for a three. 2 actions, 0 dribbles wasted, 1 more bucket. Beautiful basketball that starts with Clark's gravity and ends with Paige making the unselfish play. That kind of movement is what good basketball looks like when multiple players who understand the game are sharing the floor together. And what's significant about this group is that they're just starting. The chemistry, the timing, the intuitive reads, all of that gets better with reps. And what they showed in this game, still early in the process of learning each other's tendencies, suggests a ceiling that hasn't been tested yet. They have 4 more games over the coming days. Every possession is another opportunity to build something that could eventually become very special. But even in a debut that went about as well as anyone could have hoped, there were a couple of moments that revealed where the work still needs to happen. No performance at any level is completely without something worth examining honestly. And this one had a few moments where the picture wasn't quite as clean as the overall result suggested. The one that stood out most came near the end of the third quarter. Kayla Cooper had the ball, and Caitlin Clark was wide open on the wing. Wide open. Not kind of open, standing unguarded with 4 seconds left in the quarter and a clear look at a 3-point attempt to close out the period. The kick out didn't come. Cooper held the ball, the possession ended, and the 3-point opportunity to close the quarter evaporated. This is exactly the kind of small thing that matters in the development of team chemistry. It's not a criticism of Cooper as a player. It's an acknowledgement that when Clark is on the floor, finding her in those spots isn't just a good option, it's often the best option. The spacing she creates, the gravity she commands from defenders, even when she doesn't have the ball, means that when she's standing open on the wing, a kick out in her direction carries a high probability of good things happening. Building that instinct, that automatic recognition of where Clark is and what a pass to her in that moment means for the offense, is part of what these early games are for. You don't develop that recognition without the repetitions. You don't build that chemistry without the time together. There were other moments where Clark didn't get the ball back after making the initial read, situations where her movement after the pass should have earned her a return touch that didn't arrive. Again, not dramatic failures, just the rough edges that come with any group of players still learning how to play together. The reason these small moments are worth noting isn't to diminish what was an overwhelmingly positive debut. It's to point out that even with these moments, even with the possession management not being perfectly calibrated around Clark yet, she still produced a double-double and was the best player on the floor for Team USA. Imagine what this looks like when the chemistry is fully developed. Because even with some possession miscommunications, the numbers she put up were hard to argue with. 17 points, 12 assists, a double-double in her senior national team debut. Let those numbers sit for a moment. In her minutes on the floor, Team USA outscored the opposition by 35 points, plus 35. That's not a contribution, that's dominance. And then there's the assist number in context, 12 assists for Clark, the next highest assist total on the Team USA roster, 3. She had 4 times as many assists as anyone else on the team, 4 times, in a game where multiple capable passers were on the floor alongside her. That gap isn't a coincidence. It's the clearest possible statistical representation of what it means to have a player with Clark's vision and court feel running your offense. Other players find teammates sometimes. Clark finds teammates constantly, and she finds them in ways that produce efficient scoring opportunities rather than just moving the ball for the sake of it. Ryan Howard had a genuinely impressive game, 21 points, and a noticeable chemistry developing with Clark specifically. The connection between them showed up multiple times, with Clark finding Howard in positions where she could convert. Good player getting better opportunities because of who was distributing the ball. The broader box score told a story of balanced scoring. Paige Beckers with 9, Kelsey Plum with 7, Hamby with 8, Kayla Cooper with 10, Chelsea Gray with 3 in limited minutes. Jackie Young doing what Jackie Young always does: reliable, professional, getting her work done without making it complicated. Angel Reese's debut landed in solid territory. Not flashy, not without room to grow, but encouraging for what this young group could become. And Howard's 21, leading the team in scoring, while Clark led by a considerable margin in assists, painted the picture of an offense that was genuinely sharing the ball, something that always traces back to the player directing traffic. Chelsea Gray started, but played limited minutes and finished with 1 assist. The contrast between that number and Clark's 12 is stark enough to speak for itself. Not a knock on Gray, who is an accomplished player with a real record of success at this level. Just an honest observation about what Clark's presence brings to the distribution and pace of the offense. When the final buzzer sounded, the scoreline was never really in question, but the performance inside the numbers, particularly from Clark, gave everyone watching something genuine to be excited about. And the thing is, the significance of this debut goes well beyond what showed up on the stat sheet. There's a version of this story that's purely about basketball analysis. The assists, the shooting percentage, the plus-minus, the way she ran the offense, and all of that matters. But there's another layer to why this particular game carried the weight it carried, and why the reaction from fans and observers went beyond what a single exhibition result would typically generate. Caitlin Clark had represented younger national teams before this. She had worn the USA uniform in other contexts, but the senior national team is different. It's the stage that defines legacies in international basketball. It's the platform where the players who become synonymous with their sport in a global context establish their place in history. And this was her first time on that specific stage. After everything the lead-up to this debut had involved, the injuries of the previous season, the long wait to get healthy, the anticipation that had been building since it became clear she'd finally have this opportunity, the pressure on that first performance was significant. She handled it the way great players handle pressure. She went out and played, not cautiously, not carefully, the full version of herself, operating the way she operates when she's healthy and comfortable and given the space to be exactly who she is. The argument that she's the best point guard in the world, and that argument gets made seriously, not casually, is grounded in what she does that nobody else at this level does. The vision, the ability to see passes before they exist, the playmaking that creates efficient offense from situations where other players would settle for the safe option, the range on the shooting that forces defenders to respect her from distances that change the entire geometry of how a defense has to be organized. These aren't new observations for anyone who has been watching her career unfold, but seeing them on full display in a senior team USA uniform, with the eyes of everyone who had been waiting for this moment watching closely, it landed differently than a regular season game or even a playoff performance. There's that extra dimension to seeing her suit up for the national team that's hard to fully quantify but easy to feel. The sense that a player whose impact on women's basketball has already been enormous is now operating on the biggest possible stage. That the audience for what she does on a basketball court is expanding in ways that could reshape how the sport is perceived globally. 4 more games in the coming days will provide more data, more reps, more opportunities for this group to develop the chemistry that makes good teams great. More chances to see what this young core looks like as the pieces start to fit together more naturally. Maury looks at what Clark does when the competition level increases and the stakes get higher. The ball movement that showed up in glimpses, the beautiful, unselfish, reads the defense and makes the right play basketball that appeared in moments throughout this game can become contagious. That's how team identity develops. One player makes the right pass, another player makes the right cut, and gradually the whole group starts playing the game at a higher level because the standard has been set. Clark sets that standard every time she's on the floor, and with 4 more games ahead, the question isn't whether this team can be good. The question is how good they can actually become. And the answer to that might surprise people. So here's where everything lands when you pull it all together. A player came back from a long absence and immediately reminded everyone why she had been so eagerly anticipated. The assists came first, 3 of them on her first 3 touches, and then the shooting followed, and then the overall impact showed up in a +35 differential that made the statement as clearly as any individual stat. The young core around her showed real promise. Angel Reese continuing to develop her game in ways that expand her threat beyond the paint. Paige Beckers playing the kind of unselfish, movement-based basketball that makes every offense around her better. Ryan Howard seizing the moment with 21 points and building what looks like a real chemistry with Clark specifically. The small issues, the occasional miscommunication on kickouts, the moments where the ball didn't find Clark when it probably should have, are exactly the kind of things that get resolved through reps, through time together, through the gradual development of the intuitive understanding that elite teams build over the course of a shared experience. None of that diminishes what this game was. It was a statement, a declaration that the player everyone had been waiting to see on this stage was ready for exactly this. But here's the thought worth sitting with as this Team USA group heads into the rest of their schedule. The version of this team that showed up in the debut, already generating a 35-point swing in Clark's minutes, already producing beautiful ball movement in stretches, already showing the chemistry between Clark and the players around her beginning to develop. That wasn't a finished product. That was the beginning of something. What does this look like in 4 games, in 8 games? When the reads become automatic and the timing becomes second nature, and the defense has to account for everything this group can do simultaneously. The best point guard in the world, by the assessment of many who have watched the game at every level, just made her senior debut, and she made it look like she'd been waiting for exactly this moment for a very long time. The wait is over. The next chapter is just getting started. And if this first game is any indication of what's coming, you're going to want to pay very close attention to what happens next. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Is this Team USA group the most exciting collection of young women's basketball talent we've seen in a long time? And how good do you think Clark gets on this stage when the full picture comes together? Because this conversation is just warming up.